story for us as Americans, which is, you know, the demonization of Russians, Russian people, Russian business people has gotten to a fever pitch. These same individuals were players in our political world before Donald Trump was elected president, before he was a candidate. That we still have the same ambassador from Russia that we had before. There, really, as Putin said on his interview with Megyn Kelly, not much will change. He said you can have a Democrat who's president or a Republican who's president. It's all the same to us Russians because both parties in the U.S. political system still advance America as a hegemony, as a world power, which is the opposite of what the Kremlin wants. They don't want America to be the world leader. They want to be the world leader. Now, they've made some critical errors, namely their abortion policy, which decimated half of their population. In other words, prevented that half of their population from being born. So they can't keep up with us. And the other thing is one of their policies that's actually really smart, which is they don't take in 1 million people from the third world every year due to immigration. We do. So that's how we get to the population where we are now. We've been doing that for 30 years. You take away that 30 million people, and then you add the people back in to the Russian population who were aborted because they made abortion on demand government policy. Abortion's free, no questions asked. You just walk into a clinic, the government pays for your abortion, you're done. If they hadn't done that, their population would be much, much larger. More population means more workers. More workers means more tax base, more creativity, more jobs, more everything in a capitalistic free market system. Who knows if they'd had all of those people, if they would be in a much better position population-wise, GDP-wise, and in their station in the world as who they are as a people. Who knows? Because at the time, they were practicing communism. And then, of course, the wall fell. They're not practicing pure communism anymore, but they have a very different form of government and system than we have. So it's just interesting that this audio clip I found, it's from Fox News. And it is on Real Clear Politics. Now, Real Clear Politics is a site for any old person. It's not just conservatives or, they have audio clips from all of the shows, video clips from all of the programs. But I'm wondering how many people who just watch CNN or just watch MSNBC are aware of what he just shared there. And the reason why that's so important is pretty easy to see, don't you think? We're talking about a Russian studies scholar, the contributing editor to The Nation. This is a person who has gravitas. He is an individual who has credibility. And most Americans would probably be fascinated to hear what he just shared on Fox News. The issue is Fox News' ratings are fantastic and they're number one in the ratings for a reason. But when you add the other networks together, the total of the people who are watching the other networks dwarfs the Fox News audience by quite a bit. So they're number one when they compare one-on-one. But if you total the others, the lefty media sites are speaking to a lot more Americans. That's why Donald Trump's Twitter feed is so important. So they're speaking to more people. And what they're saying is, well, the Republicans are using this dossier story to hide the fact that President Trump colluded with the Russians. The Republicans don't want you to know that Donald Trump's guilty of collusion. And oh, by the way, one of his employees is a wife beater. Like that has anything to do with anything. People's employees go rogue all the time in their personal lives. How is that Donald Trump's fault? So all of these things are getting swept under the rug because they don't want people to know about them. But you can get that info here. I'm Stacy on the right, on Urban Family Talk. All right, we're going to be back with more right after these messages. Keep it here.
Preborn is saving babies' lives.
My name is Omaris, and I was 19 when I found out I was pregnant. I felt that if I brought a child to this planet, that I could not take care of it, and I could not be mentally prepared to handle everything that comes with having a child. So I thought my best option was to have an abortion. And once I came to have my ultrasound and I heard his heartbeat, I could not have an abortion.
The Ministry of Preborn saves babies' lives through ultrasounds. When a mother hears her baby's heartbeat on an ultrasound, she'll choose life 80% of the time. To donate and provide for a free ultrasound to help save a baby's life, go to preborn.com or dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. All gifts are tax deductible. Your love can save a life.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a legacy moment. I'll never forget reading Frank Peretti's book, The Wounded Spirit. I was deeply moved by his personal testimony of the painful ridicule and rejection he experienced in his teen years. He was excluded because of his lack of athletic ability and physical deformity. I must admit, as I read that book, my eyes filled with tears on many occasions. He said the thing that kept him going was, first of all, a teacher who believed in him, the unconditional love and acceptance of his parents and his family, and then thirdly, the realization that Jesus Christ accepted him and didn't give up on him. Rejection is an awful thing. Sadly, there's too much rejection even in the Christian community. Oh, we're more subtle about it than high school kids are, but sometimes our arrogant attitudes announce, hey, look, you can't come in this group. You're not really a part of us. Thankfully, God doesn't treat us as if there's a pecking order where some of us are better than others. No, there's an equal access to Calvary and equal access to the heart of God. In Ephesians chapter 3, verses 3, 4, and 6, the Apostle Paul talks about God's great plan of inclusion. He says that by revelation there was made known to me the mystery, as I wrote before in brief. By referring to this, when you read, you can understand my insight into the mystery of Christ. To be specific, that the Gentiles are fellow heirs and fellow members of the body and fellow partakers of the promise in Christ Jesus through the gospel. Fellow heirs, fellow members, fellow partakers, they're not excluded. Here's what I want you to remember today. If you placed your faith in Jesus Christ, you're on the team and you have all the rights and privileges of everybody else. You're accepted.
More information about the ministry of Crawford Loritz can be found online at livingalegacy.org.
Yeah, we are the colors outside of the lines, and we paint a picture so one of a kind. Attention, we call attention. Our mission, redirect attention. So let's break the mold, go off the wall.
All right, welcome back to the program, everybody. Call lines are wide open. 866-963-2037. While we are waiting to see if we can get our guest for this segment, we have a ton of information that we can cover. First off, I want to point you guys over to the website where we have new content up at stacyontheright.com. And I'm so excited about that. Just some new kind of things that we're putting up over there that are resources. They're also interesting to read and fun to share when you're online or someplace and you want to share something that's not only just about the news or just about the show. Now we have the encouragement segments that we do here on the show. Those are going up on stacyontheright.com. So you can check those out and enjoy those and share them if you feel so led to do. And also, I want to share with you guys that I just booked my ticket. I'm going to be back in D.C. again next week on Tuesday at the White House. They're having a Black History Month reception, and I'm so excited to have received an invitation. And I believe this will be my one opportunity. I've attended so many events where the president has been there, but I've not been able to shake his hand. I'm hoping that Tuesday is my day. So I'll get to finally meet the president and the First Lady, Melania Trump. So I'm very excited about the opportunity to get to do that. And then we also have our information on India Partners, and that's our partner for this next couple of weeks. And we are hoping to have many, many, many days worth of safety donated by our listening audience. And just so you understand what that sounds like, it's $7.08, providing 1 day of safety, rescue, and care for a child who's escaping the red light areas of Mumbai, India. And this is a place where women and children are sold into sexual servitude, and India Partners rescues them and builds safe houses so they can get back to being normal people again. And they provide this safe place for them to live and for the kids to go to school and for the women to just be women again. And so $7.08 provides one day. So we're really excited about this. Please consider joining us. Give as soon as and often as you can. 877-616-2396, or go to urbanfamilytalk.com or afr.net, and you can give in any one of those locations, and we'd be so grateful to you for doing that. Also, I want to point you guys over to the merchandise page on the Stacy on the Right show. Good place to go visit. So now, one of the things that I thought was an interesting story from this week, besides the budget, obviously the budget has been a really big deal. And so we played the audio from Rand Paul, and I've seen some of the things that have been discussed since then. And this is an interesting story because it just doesn't make any sense to me how people can get, can enjoy Bette Midler anymore. As much as I enjoy Bette Midler. So I don't know if you guys saw this. Bette Midler came out and said, where's that rogue neighbor when we need him? We need him to attack Rand Paul again, because Rand Paul didn't want to vote for the budget proposal. Now, I'm not sure what Bette Midler loves about the budget proposal other than the drunken spending aspects of it, but Rand Paul was making a principled stand against increasing the deficit, which is something that Republicans have said over and over again during their time in the minority. But now that they're in the majority, I guess deficit spending is in vogue. It's like those high-waisted pants that are making their way back in the fashion world. Everything that was old is new again. So deficit spending, which was bad before, is now new again, and this time it's good. So it's crazy to me because Bette Midler, yeah, she can say things like that, but she doesn't have to worry about being attacked because she has armed security. She's one of those people who believes in gun control for you, but for herself, she wants armed security, and she doesn't just want it, she has it. So it's crazy that she would say something like that and get away with it without anybody calling her on it. But that is what's happening. So also, there's been the up and down, which the media is gleefully reporting on, which is the Dow Jones turning positive, and then it's in the negative, and then it's in the positive, and then it's in the negative. And so I was listening to some CBS radio right before the show, and they're reporting on it like every break. The Dow is down 24. It's back up 4. They weren't reporting on it at all when it was over 26,000. So, a conspiracy theorist would say, Democratic oligarchs are getting together to tank the stock market because the president cut taxes and the tax cut makes him and the Republicans look good. Maybe that's true. I don't know. I think that sounds like conspiracy theorists, but yeah, it's an interesting dichotomy that we're seeing here. And then you've got the Dow struggling for gains and wild trading and set for the worst week in 9 years. So they're saying that this is the worst activity we've seen on the stock market since the October 2008 bubble burst. And so it fell again once in the final hour of trading, and that was last night, down 100 points. And so, it's broke below its 200-day moving average, which apparently drops of 1,000 points that remain below a certain level indicate a permanent switch out of one kind of market into another. So I prefer to hold off and kind of just settle in for the long haul and keep my eyes peeled and watch what's happening rather than, doing a whole lot of Chicken Little screaming from the rooftops. And I think that's probably the best way to approach it. So now we have our guest. Okay, perfect. So it's my pleasure to welcome our guest for this segment. It's Brian Maloney, Editor-in-Chief of MediaEqualizer.com. Brian, thanks for coming on today.
Hey, Stacy, thanks for having me on.
Sure. So let's talk about the Democrats' memo, the Republican memo, or whichever memo floats our boat. Apparently, the Democrats don't see anything of any consequence in that memo, and I a week later, I think it's pretty consequential.
Well, I think it is too, but they've had their week now to spin it as a giant nothing burger or whatever, and of course their memo will be earth-shattering and will point it all back to Russia. If we could just focus the entire nation back on this crazy Russia-Putin scheme that they've been pushing on us for a year, then we'll all be well.
Yeah, except we're learning more and more things. In the first segment, I played some audio of it's Stephen F. Cohen, who is a Russia expert. So this is someone who actually has legitimate credentials and has lived in Russia and has been there for many, many years investigating and doing his history on Russia. And so he's an American, and he comes to any conversation having to do with Russia with all of this background. And he believes that Carter Page and Manafort, they were both surveilled in order to get access to then candidate Trump, because they couldn't get a warrant on Trump because he hadn't done anything wrong. And that the intel community is acting as the fourth branch of government because they seem to leak out stuff that they want Americans to think about and know and hold everything else under their vest, which is, to me, really connected to this series of memos.
And what this boils down to is we can look at it from a legal perspective or from a political perspective. To me, what this shows is the strength of the left in their ability to somehow manipulate this issue to try to put Trump on the defense when actually the fingers are pointing at them. Why were their people, and when I say their people, the SWAT people in the FBI or whatever, in a position to be spying on Trump on behalf of Hillary, and somehow the media portrays this as a scandal affecting Trump? So they have it backwards, and we on the right are allowing this to happen. And this is where we need to become more forceful and assertive, and we haven't been.
I agree. And so when we look at the magnitude of, so this is important. I think what's being missed by most people who, you're pumping gas, you're buying groceries, you're taking kids to and from, you're going to work, you're doing the stuff that you have to do, doctor's appointments, house maintenance appointments. You have to sit down and eat. You have to watch television. You have to live your life. You have to sleep, so you can't pay attention to this only like it is for us as it's our jobs. But what the American people are missing is that people who were entrusted with top secret security clearances, people who have guns that are issued by the government, they made a conscious decision to oppose a presidential candidate while they were on the job. I'm not talking about the work you do in the evening. When you're done at work, you go home, you do some phone banking for your favorite candidate. This is while these people were on the job, they were opposing an incoming administration. And then afterwards, when he was the president, they were opposing him on the taxpayer dime, using the taxpayer-funded phones. This is a huge, huge story.
Well, it is really shocking because, then they will retire with big fat pensions having done that work. And there have been no consequences so far for any of them. And as I've said, the media is portraying this as a problem for Trump, as though Trump did something wrong. So we've got a very warped narrative out there. But the point that you made about us having jobs and a life and children to raise and things to do is important, because I think the left's advantage is that they don't have any of those things to do. They can live, eat, breathe activism all day long, and they do, whereas conservatives have a life, and that's always where we're at a disadvantage in terms of energy and what we need to do.
Yeah, so they do have in their activism sphere, it's a lot of people who, when you see them, you're like, oh, so I see why you only do politics, because they're not balanced people. They're just only there to eat pizza, drink beer, and work on destroying the country. And they want to destroy it because they're miserable people. They're miserable. Their lives are horrible. And when they're sitting around plotting these things, you can tell it's like, I want everybody else to be as miserable as I am. It's not enough that we've destroyed all the inner cities in America. Now we need to destroy all the suburbs and everywhere else. Everything should be third worldish and kind of like the worst parts of Mexico and Honduras, not like America. And this is who they are.
Well, that's exactly right. And they start with the college campuses, making sure that no one can enjoy a moment of attending a university, that every moment has to be pure, just sheer misery. You cannot laugh or, there's nothing to be happy about in this world. It's a miserable place. But the bottom line is, as miserable and as maladjusted as they may be, they still do have that time. They do have that energy. To me, we've got a lot of work to do this year, Stacy, between now and November, with elections that are going to be absolutely critical. Even if you think the GOP is letting us down on a lot of things, and they are, the alternative is so much worse. It's hard to even fathom.
Okay. You know what, Brian? I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I sometimes touch on it here on the show, but it can't be stressed enough that as much as I don't like the current spending bill that just passed and is now the new budget, which did no mention of defunding Planned Parenthood was ever brought up in that discussion. And we were promised that Planned Parenthood would be defunded. Now, they expanded the Mexico City policy, fantastic, but the giant, the abortion giant that's now under investigation for actually keeping aborted babies alive so their baby parts could be harvested for sale. This is still getting funded by taxpayers. I have no understanding of how that is the world I'm living in right now, that the Republicans are in charge and that's the world we're living in. Yet here we are. But that doesn't mean in November I'm not going to put a sign in my yard and go to the polls and vote, not just in November, but in the primaries as well. I have to do that because as disappointed as I may be in some aspects, I want more of the tax reform bill that we saw. I want more of the strong foreign policy that we've seen. Everything's not bad. It's kind of like a roller coaster a little bit, but we need to be active.
Well, the odd thing, and the most surprising thing, in my cynicism, I guess, is that the one person who's governing as a conservative is Trump. And for the most part, not all the time, and I'm sure you can name some examples of where he's not, and I get that. But, you know, for the most part, he is 80-90% of the time, whereas the GOP Congress is governing as conservatives maybe 10-20% of the time, if that's that. And the spending bill is a great example. They're not even trying to advance anything conservative anymore, even to be fiscally conservative. So if they don't even have that, what's left? What do they stand for? And I think the answer is nothing.
Right. Well, they stand for the illegals, Brian. If they stand for anything,
it's
abortion on demand and illegals.
They stand for letting Nancy Pelosi push them around. You know, when we have 8-hour filibusters in the House, which, you know, I remember being taught about government in high school, and I remember that filibusters occur in the Senate. So we're in a weird, bizarre world now.
Absolutely. So the question is, how do the Republicans utilize there's just a cornucopia, a bevy, a buffet. What other word can I think of here? There are many, 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 many audio and visual clips of the Democrats advocating for the illegals at the expense of veterans and children and Americans in general. Are they going to take those audio and video clips and create the kinds of commercials that move the narrative for November? Because certainly the Democrats have not shied away from providing the material.
Well, we have the ability potentially to create our own groups that can advocate on behalf of good conservative candidates and have independent expenditures where we would utilize that material. And we need to be getting going on all that now. Now, it's already February, and you could say, well, the election isn't until November, but that's the blink of an eye in terms of campaigning and elections.
It is. So let's talk a little bit more about the memo. And I think you have characterized it. Oh, that's the music. This is kind of sad. All right. Thank you so much for coming on today, Brian. I appreciate your time and the work that you do at Media Equalizer. Thank you so much. Keep it up, and we'll talk again soon.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. That was Brian Maloney, Media Equalizer. Fantastic website. And we'll be back with more Stacy on the right after these messages. Stay there.
John 1:1 says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." Remember in the Word when Jesus was responding to Satan's antics? When Satan was trying to tempt Jesus with food, Jesus responded with himself. He responded with the word. There are no new tricks in Satan's book. At the end of the day, his job is to create fear and doubt, and steal, kill, and destroy. So if Jesus, who is fully God, responded to Satan with the word, why do we think that we can get along without the word? The Bible says, study to show thyself approved. Equip yourself with the word daily and watch your response to Satan's foolishness change. One of my coworkers, Pastor Joseph Parker, teaches that it's good to read at least 3 chapters a day. Sounds good to me. Today is a good day to start. With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Tony Johnson. Connect with us at urbanfamilytalk.com.
It's time to call your senators. We need to tell them to put an end to the liberals' filibuster, switch to a majority vote, and defund Planned Parenthood. Call the Capitol Switchboard at 202-224-3121 or go to afaaction.net. Senators respond to constituent calls. So call 202-224-3121 and tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood. Your call will make a difference.
Target continues to allow men into their women's restroom and changing areas. Will 2018 be the year Target reverses this dangerous and reckless policy? The American Family Association will continue to work toward the goal of convincing Target to reverse its misguided policy that places women and children at risk. Protect your wives, daughters, and family. Don't shop at Target. Join the over 1.5 million people who have signed the pledge to boycott Target. Visit afa.net.
Yo, what up, Sid?
Yo, what's up, Mike? How you doing?
Man, I'm good, bro. Just left the club, the usual.
The club? Man, them clubs don't love back, man. You ain't learned yet. You better slow down, dude.
Ah, come on, Sid. You remember those days? We used to turn up together, man.
Used to, brother. I'm on something much different.
Like what, though? I mean, that Jesus music you be rapping about or beatboxing or whatever you be doing.
I'm saying, though, that's how I worship. God gave me rap, so I give it back.
Why, though? Gospel rap is boring, man.
Boring? There's nothing boring about the ransom that ransomed me with himself. Took me off the shelf to transform me into my best. Surrounding me with those of like minds. He drops bombs, some of which is found on urbanfamilytalk.com.
I don't need no stained glass to be washed in his blood. I don't need no perfect, put together pretty words to be enough. No, I want Jesus and his real love.
Can you start by just explaining how much of this was new to you, that there was some success on the part of the Russian government in actually breaching these voter rolls, voter systems in these certain states? And do you feel like DHS has done what they need to do in warning these states about what actions they need to take?
Yeah, it's a great question, Casey. And as a member of the Intelligence Committee, I probably had a better, above average sense for the breadth and intensity of the Russian attempts against attacks on our election infrastructure. Ken Delaney is right, there's still no evidence that votes were changed. But the point is, Casey, that even for somebody who serves on the Intelligence Committee, each month brings new evidence about the depth of these attacks. I mean, getting a look at the Twitter ads that the Russians ran, the Facebook videos that the Russians understanding how many people were exposed to those Russian-purchased videos. That's something that has happened over time, and so we are still learning. And the answer to your question is that I think it's fair to say that in registrars' offices all over the country, in DHS and elsewhere, people are very seriously addressing this. Whether that's happening fast enough or not, I do worry about.
So, he's right. So he says there's still no evidence that the votes were changed. Yeah, that isn't that what we're talking about here? That the Russians were able to get people to vote differently, or that they somehow hacked electoral systems. And there's no doubt that they did that. There's no doubt that they actually came in and launched thousands of attacks on the local voter integrity systems through which we Americans exercise our right to vote. No doubt about that. No doubt they were doing those things. No doubt they were spreading their own news stories. But some of the things that they were spreading were links from legitimate news stories, from legitimate news sources. So this is a very complex issue. And to simply say the Russians materially impacted the election without taking into consideration all of the facts surrounding it as we learn more, and how our own government, the Democrats, and their operatives within the deep state, in the intelligence community, and in regular government, and the other branches of government, how all of those people worked in concert to try to prevent Donald Trump from being elected. And then once he was elected, tried to prevent him from becoming the president of the United States. And then once he was the president, tried to prevent him from serving out his first year in office. How about all that? As the guy likes to say, how about that? How about it? So where do we, as the American people, just say we're getting some straight news here? Well, there are places that we can get straight news, but for the most part, we've got people spreading falsehoods by the millions. So the most recent one, let me grab this here for you. Two stories I've got for you. One is how wealthy New Yorkers are fighting to keep the homeless out of their neighborhoods. Now, that's hypocrisy that stinks to high heaven. And we'll get to that in just a second. But right here, I want you to hear about American-bred propaganda, a purveyor of lies who spreads those lies into the ears of multiple millions of Americans. Do you know who I'm talking about? Jimmy Kimmel. Jimmy Kimmel, who used to do comedy. He used to actually say stuff that was funny to make people laugh. No more. He's busy doing politics now. So he actually, this is last night, he tried to mock a court ruling that protected the free speech rights of bakers, but instead revealed that he basically has no idea what he's talking about. So this is a California judge who ruled on Monday that the state can't force Tasty's Bakery, don't let me butcher their name, Tasty's Bakery owner Kathy Miller to bake a wedding cake for a same-sex wedding. Now here's the story. And this is actually great news because it's freedom, and it's so weird to have a judge in California make this ruling because California is the state of fruit and nuts, and the few conservatives who are left there are just constantly in a state of flummox. Like, how can this be happening to me? Is this still America? Yet here we are. This California judge ruled on Monday that the state can't force Tasty's Baker owner Kathy Miller to bake a wedding cake for a same-sex wedding. Now, here are the details. The gay couple comes in, and as a bakery owner, she does wedding cakes in addition to other special event cakes. And the wedding cakes are obviously not baked. So the other cakes that she bakes, you can custom order them, but then she keeps a refrigerator filled with, you're doing a shotgun wedding, or did your cake baker pull out on you at the last minute and you don't have a wedding cake for your wedding? You can come in and find a wedding cake already baked that she will then, maybe add a couple things to, or sell it to you as is for you to use for your wedding. But most of those special event cakes are for birthdays, graduations, office celebrations, etc. Okay? So she's got all of that going on, right? She's got that going on. So they come in, this gay couple, they're like, we're getting married. And she's like, well, I can sell you one of these cakes, or I can refer you to another bakery that I know that does same-sex wedding cakes, and they do a beautiful job. But as a Christian, I can't bake a custom cake for you and design it for your wedding because it's against my religious beliefs. So they say, no, you're going to bake us a cake. So they sue. And the state agency that covers this kind of garbage in California said, yeah, you're going to have to go into that kitchen and bake this cake for them under order of the state of California. So they take it to a judge, and the judge says, actually, you can't actually enslave this person and make her go bake you a cake. Like, you've been referred to someone else, but the religious freedom aspects of these things, we really have to respect the religious freedom of this woman who bakes cakes for a living. She's offered to sell you any other cake in the store. She's also said, here is another bakery that does beautiful cakes that will bake for you. I can't do it because of religious reasons. So she's not discriminated against you in any way. She's saying religiously, she cannot condone the wedding that you guys are going to have, but she doesn't mind you referring you to a friend baker that takes this kind of work, and also you buying anything else in the store. So she's not saying I don't serve gays. She's saying, I won't bake cakes for your weddings. Two totally different things. One is a mountain that we all have to oppose because as people, well, no matter what kind of sin we're engaging in, we're still people. But the other one is you're not a person because you have religious objections. You are my slave. So Jimmy Kimmel doesn't know jack-ola about this situation. He says, he did this skit. So he puts together a skit on his show. He says, in the skit, the setup is the restaurant declines to serve gay people and Jewish people certain dishes because of various employees' religious beliefs. In one instance, the waiter, who's Kimmel, explained to the gay customer can order a salad the chef made yesterday, but not a salad that is not yet made because the chef doesn't want to serve gay people. Now, is that the same thing? You know it's not. You and I both know it's not. And for all of my liberal listeners and viewers in the audience who, thank God for you, I really do appreciate you listening. And I know I have had one person say, you don't really mean that. Yes, I do. How do you know what I mean? How can any person know what I'm thinking unless you just go by what I say? If I didn't mean it, why would I keep saying it? I mean it. I appreciate people who take the time to listen to views that they don't agree with. You know why I appreciate that? Because it's a sign of maturity. It's a sign that any person can listen to the opposing view and think about it. And you may not ever agree with me, but you've listened. That's pretty amazing in today's day and age. And I do it. I know I've listened to more than one podcast where I could literally feel my body heating up. I'm like, what am I listening to? But I spend some time listening and get the nugget of what they're trying to say. Then I decide, do I agree with this or no? Interesting perspective or no? Did they present that well or no? And then I move on. I'm still alive. I'm still doing all the stuff I would normally do. I just heard an opposing view. It didn't kill me. So that's why I say thank you to the people in the audience who are Democrats or independents or politically agnostic, but you don't agree with the viewpoint, specifically the Republican viewpoint of Stacy on the right, the show, but you still listen to the show and then you put in your comments and what have you. So it doesn't matter what your political viewpoint is. The fact is, he's not telling the truth about this case in California about this woman who bakes cakes. She's not saying, let me give you an old cake from 7 years ago that's like basically petrified and you have to take that because I don't want to serve gays. She's saying, I'll serve you in any other way, but I cannot make you a gay wedding cake. But you can get a gay wedding cake made at my friend who is they don't have any religious objections and their cakes are of equal quality or greater quality than my own. You will be very satisfied there. I guarantee it. That is not the same. The attitude when someone says, I'm not serving you because you're Jewish, that's anti-Semitism. In what way can a Jewish person say, I am no longer of Jewish descent? If you are Jewish, it means your mother is Jewish and her mother was Jewish all the way back. And you know the Jewish people can trace their line all the way back to the actual Torah. So that's what being Jewish is. It's your ethnic background. You cannot change it. You cannot denounce it. You can live any way you want to, but you'll always be Jewish if your mother was Jewish. How is not wanting to serve a Jewish person the same as saying, I'll serve you anything you'd like out of the store, but if you need a gay wedding cake baked, I can't bake a cake for that event because my religious beliefs don't allow me to do that. How are those two things the same? And so for me, this isn't about squelching the opposing viewpoint. People who support homosexual marriage and the redefining of marriage, it's not about squelching that viewpoint. In all things, I would prefer, if we're going to have this conversation, to just compare the apples to the apples and just debate the merits of what it is that they are trying to do. And I say trying because God's word is the same no matter what. Marriage is between a man and a woman. It's a union between a man, a woman, and God, actually. It mimics the Godhead. And there is no law on earth that can change what the Bible has laid out. It's the living word of God, and it is unchangeable. There are ramifications for changing it, but it cannot. You can make all your attempts, but in the end, you've not changed anything because you'll be shocked to find out at the judgment seat that God's not going to be up there going, okay, hold on a second. Hold on, everybody. I got to make some changes here before we talk about the next people who are coming up, for the judgment seat. Because down in America, they've changed the definition of marriage from one man and one woman to a man and a man or a woman and a woman or any other iteration thereof. No, that's not happening, y'all. That's not what's going to happen. So we can make whatever laws we want. And the laws that are just and follow the dictates of the Bible, those are legitimate laws. And the ones that we make that are illegitimate, like if we were to say, oh, it's fine to murder, as we've done with abortion, do you think that changes what the Bible says about abortion? No. Do you really think that? So this isn't about not wanting to talk about whatever you think you might believe or whatever the new thing, the newfangled latest iteration of the liberals' policies. It's not about that. What it is about is the liberals, like Jimmy Kimmel, literally trying to strong arm and force a person, literally push them into their kitchen. You're going to make this cake, and then stand over them. And what will they do if she doesn't make it? They'll take her business. They'll run her out of business. They'll fine her into oblivion so that she can't keep baking cakes. And they'll make sure that she'll never be able to have a business again because the debt that she owes to their state will be so great, she'll be working that off for the rest of her life. That is slavery. And that is what the Democrats are proposing that you sign on to. If you are a Democrat and you think Jimmy Kimmel is just so awesome, that's what you're signing on to. So you're against slavery for black people. You're against white people owning black people, but you're okay with gay people owning creative artists. You're okay with people saying, I know you're planning on doing something else this weekend, or I know you planned on doing a contract for some other wedding or some other special event, some graduation this weekend, but you're not doing that. You're going to bake this cake for this same-sex wedding. And if you don't bake it, we'll take your business. We'll run you out of town on a rail. We'll ruin your reputation, and we will have fun doing it, laughing gleefully as we go along. And then we will still go over to the person you referred us to and get our cake baked and have our wedding, but we will have also destroyed your life. How can you sign on to that as a human being? But we all know humans are depraved and indifferent and full of sin. Our hearts are wicked. So how can you as a Christian sign on to that? So before you start to, well, I'm a Christian, but don't but me. You are a Christian and you believe the word of God. You are a Christian and you put the word of God over what some political party is telling you to do. And this can be as hard as you'd like to make it or as easy as you'd like to make it. It's your choice. If the Republicans were to suddenly say, thought this thing through, and we really feel like we're going to go ahead and change the platform, and we're going to be all about abortion on demand, that would be the day that I would publicly denounce the Republican Party and remove all of my affiliations from therein, because that goes against the Bible. That's the decision that I've made. So it's not about the political party affiliation. It's about which comes first. Is it what God says we are to do, or is it what those political types tell us we are to do? It's not really that hard. You pick one, it supersedes, move on to the next thing. That's it. So Jimmy Kimmel is wrong again. I know that's not news, but hey, it's Friday. You know what I'm saying? We'll be back with more Stacy on the right after these messages.
Family Talk.
Always stay up to date with the latest in the culture war from the news team of One News Now. Use the One News Now mobile app. It neatly categorizes news and articles from the One News Now website in an easy-to-find format. You can read the stories, watch videos, and conveniently share any news story. It's now available for download from your phone's App Store.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. A $45 monthly fee could end up costing big labor billions. Public unions are getting nervous, while those who don't like how they operate are claiming the free lunch may be over soon. An explosive case regarding government employees and the First Amendment that the Supreme Court will hear on February 26th could redefine the relationship between public unions and workers. There's more reaction to the new bathroom policy at Walgreens stores nationwide. The pharmacy store chain is now allowing people to use the bathroom of the gender in which they identify. Robert Kuykendall of Second Vote thinks this is absurd.
Walgreens has now said anyone can use whatever bathroom they want in their stores based on how they feel. And this is the problem with the whole gender identity movement. People can say, I'm a man today, I'm a woman tomorrow, and everything's just based on how I feel, but it's not based on science. It's not based on how we were created. And Walgreens has essentially caved to the radical LGBT activists.
According to the Los Angeles Times, Walgreens' new policy comes after a biological female who is not transgender claimed she was told at a California Walgreens last year that she could not use the women's restroom based on her appearance. That customer happened to be on her way to an LGBT pride event. A Toledo, Ohio abortion clinic has received the unwelcome news that it will be required to comply with the law. Charlie Butts explains.
Since 2013, Capital Care Network has fought in the courts all the way to the Ohio Supreme Court against state standards that would put it out of business. Ed Sitter of Greater Toledo Right to Life tells AFN pro-lifers in Columbus launched a continuing prayer campaign.
God in his faithfulness has answered our prayers, and justice has prevailed, and to him be the glory. The Ohio Supreme Court affirmed the Ohio Department of Health's license revocation of Capital Care Network, and they no longer can provide surgical abortions at that location.
The primary contention was that the state had singled out abortion clinics for a requirement that outpatient surgical clinics have to have a contractual relationship with a local hospital to handle their emergency cases, including botched abortions. Sitter says that's not so.
These are standards that all ambulatory surgical facilities must maintain. It's not singling out abortion clinics. But at the same time, should abortion clinics provide less safety and care for their patients than other similar facilities that perform other outpatient surgery?
In spite of the 5-year legal battle, Sitter says Toledo residents can take solace in the fact that the rule of law will prevail, that it's a win for women and for preborn children. I'm Charlie Butts.
A conservative black activist says the killing of an NFL football player by a drunken illegal alien shows that the left in this country picks illegal aliens over American citizens. More from Chad Groening.
Indianapolis Colts linebacker Edwin Jackson was killed early Super Bowl Sunday when Manuel Orrego Zavala, a Guatemalan national with no driver's license who had been deported twice, slammed into the car Jackson was riding in. The Uber driver was also killed. Authorities say Orrego Zavala had been convicted of drunk driving in California, calling into attention that he shouldn't have been behind the wheel or even in the United States. Nadra Enzi is a member of the advisory council of the Project 21 Black Leadership Network. But he says there has been scant coverage of this tragedy because illegal aliens are higher on the politically correct food chain than American blacks.
The perpetrators, neo-Nazis, alt-right, Aryan nations, you name it, there would be national outcry. The left refuses to see certain things because it doesn't fit their narrative. Black lives don't matter. Liberal narratives matter. That's the overwhelming conclusion one draws from this and other cases.
Enzi says this is nonpartisan and really has nothing to do with anybody's political agenda.
Considering that American blacks have only been fully enfranchised citizens for 50 years, my lifetime, this is something that should be a strategic concern for us because Jim Crow was bad enough. Juan Crow promises to be infinitely worse.
I'm Chad Groening.
For American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
Listen to Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp.
I mean, did you hear that?
Pointed.
Remember that you're not only a Christian on Sunday.
And insightful.
Deception and lies have been accepted as the norm from the Democrats.
But most of all, she's on the right.
That scripture from the Bible, it says the heart of the fool inclines to the left. Just kept popping into my mind.
Stacy on the Right. Now heard weekday afternoons from 2 to 4 Central on Urban Family Talk. Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
Can you start by just explaining how much of this was new to you, that there was some success on the part of the Russian government in actually breaching these voter rolls, voter systems in these certain states? And do you feel like DHS has done what they need to do in warning these states about what actions they need to take?
Yeah, it's a great question, Casey. And you know, as a member of the Intelligence Committee, I probably had a better, above average sense for the breadth and intensity of the Russian attempts against attacks on our election infrastructure. Ken Delaney is right, there's still no evidence that votes were changed. But the point is, Casey, that even for somebody who serves on the Intelligence Committee, each month brings new evidence about the depth of these attacks. I mean, you know, getting a look at the Twitter ads that the Russians ran, the Facebook videos that the Russians understanding how many people were exposed to those Russian-purchased videos. That's something that has happened over time, and so we are still learning. And the answer to your question is that I think it's fair to say that in registrars' offices all over the country, in DHS and elsewhere, people are very seriously addressing this. Whether that's happening fast enough or not, I do worry about.
Oh, welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk and American Family Radio. Thanks for being with us today. We have so much more show for you right now. You've got Geraldo Rivera resenting the Democrats' exploitation of DACA so-called dreamers. Now, I got a word for you on that, and then we're going to jump into our next subject. We got quite a few more things to cover today on the program, and hour 2 is all about you. We don't have a guest here because our listeners are the guests, and 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. You can call in, talk about whatever you want. It's Friday, you know, let's just hang loose. But I do have a lot of topics that I was able to really get some reading in this morning, in addition to some other work, because I'm seriously, as soon as I get 3 things done, I realize, oh, I have 6 more things to do. I feel like I need a person, but I think the person is me, so I have to get to it. So we're going to talk about Bermuda becoming the first jurisdiction in the world to repeal same-sex marriage. But I have to say something about this whole thing with the Democrats giving all of this really flowery, loving, sweet language to the children of illegal immigrants and the lawbreakers and all that stuff. And so we don't hear them have that same kind of flowery language about Black orphans, kids who are in foster care, kids who are a part of safe homes and safe communities programs. All over the United States, there are like 500,000 in total kids in foster care and orphanages and other state-run programs where their parents cannot or will not take care of them. And so the evangelical community, the churches around the country have really stepped up to the plate, and they've been running programs encouraging people to adopt children. You know, no matter what your family size, you can always bring in some more kids. And there are also other programs that you can support. If you're not able to adopt a child from out of one of these situations, you can be a safe home, which is basically temporarily, you're a safe place for temporary, these kids can land at your home and be with you. There is no one's under the impression that they're going to be your kid permanently. The kid knows they're with you for a while. You know that the situation is temporary, but you're able to love on the kids and give them a stable environment until their own parents or guardians can get their back on their feet and take them back. There are also things you can do if you can't do that, because there are plenty of people who their family is up to the brimming at their house. There's no more room for any more people to come in, or there's not the resources available, but they can give their time or their money, or they can give supplies. So there are ways you can be a part of this movement that is nationwide, driven primarily by social workers and the Christian communities, different Christian communities, not just evangelicals, who are working to make sure that these kids can grow up and succeed in spite of their family conditions. Why don't the Democrats talk about these Black kids like that? Why have I never heard a Democrat say, oh my gosh, there's so many beautiful, potential-filled dreamer kids in foster care and orphanages where the moms and the dads are sometimes drug addicts, they're sometimes felons, they're in prison, they've abandoned them, they can't be found. And these kids are not just beautiful and bright and full of potential, but they're Americans and they deserve our support. Why is the Congressional Black Caucus not talking about that? Why is it that Jesse Jackson and that other one, Al Sharpton, why are they constantly advocating for illegal aliens instead of Black kids for which their organizations are named? National Action Network is supposed to be a group of people who've come together to do activism to improve communities for Black people, not for illegal aliens. All of these constituency groups these constituents of these groups, I should say, are being poorly served. If you're voting for the Democrats, and that means you are supporting the Congressional Black Caucus, what have they done for you lately? Exactly what policies are they advocating for? What bills have they proposed and passed? What major new programming have they presented to stop the grade school to prison pipeline? What are they doing for kids who are literally on their own from the time they wake up in the morning until the time they lay their heads down on a mattress with no sheets, no curtains up to the window, no food in the refrigerator? They're living on their own, taking care of themselves. What is the CBC doing for them? Just let that sink into you for a second. Let it marinate on your brain that the CBC exists to enrich itself. They don't care about Black kids in inner cities, because if they did, they would not spend one moment of their time advocating for illegal aliens who are bringing crime and drug activity and violence, beheadings, machete killings, rapes, increasing the number of kids who are addicted to drugs. They would not advocate for communities that are bringing that into Black inner city neighborhoods. They wouldn't advocate for that. They would say, you know what? Gutierrez can advocate for the illegal aliens, but I'm a member of the Congressional Black Caucus. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to represent my constituents. I'm going to advocate for some criminal justice reform. I'm going to advocate for stiffer penalties for repeat violent offenders, but everyone else who can be rehabilitated, I'm going to advocate for them to go into these second chance programs so these people can get a chance to make it out of these horrible neighborhoods and join the remaining 80+% or 78% of Black Americans who are making it in America. It is a total misnomer that every Black person you see is poverty stricken and doesn't have any money and is a felon. That's just garbage. Many, many millions of Blacks in America are not just making it or scraping by, they're killing it. But the reputation out of Hollywood is that we're all just 3 steps away from calling some white person massa and asking for some money or robbing somebody. That's Hollywood for you. Again, who do you belong to? Whose ideas are you buying into? So the CBC is a big, huge group of elected Black folks up on the Hill. They're in the seat of power and they've got nothing done for their constituents for decades on end. But oh yeah, I'm sorry. It's the DACA people, the Deferred Action on Childhood Arrivals, and the illegal aliens who were brought here as kids. They're the dreamers. They're the ones who we all need to stop what we're doing. Put down your coffee mug, get off the treadmill, put down your laptop and your work that you're doing, trying to meet your deadlines for your boss or for your business. And everybody shift your eyes over to the left so we can pay attention to these dreamers. They're dreaming of learning how to speak English, since almost half of them don't speak a lick of English, but they were brought here as children and have been going to American school, public school, and living off the dole. They have a higher rate of receiving food stamps than Black people do. But who are the poster children for food stamps? Black folks. Everybody thinks Black women are on welfare. I mean, everybody. If they see you out during the day pushing a stroller or shopping at Target and you're Black and you have your little kids in the basket, they automatically assume you're on welfare. I haven't been on welfare a day in my life. I cannot tell you how many times, I had a little old lady tell me at the Target back when I was there with all 3 of our kids, which, by the way, are all by my husband. And we were there, me and the kids, shopping for groceries. And we stopped by the shoe department and Madison was a baby. And Maddie turned and looked at the lady and said, hi. And she said, oh, she's so cute. I said, thank you. She said, yeah, but you might want to stop now while you're ahead. 3 kids. That's a lot for you, to handle by yourself. I said, lady, I'm married. These are me and my husband's kids and we're taking care of them. She was like, oh, I'm sorry. I was like, excuse me, kept pushing my basket. You'd be amazed at what people can fix their little mouths to say. And I didn't ask her. But I'm willing to bet you dollars to donuts that woman was a Democrat, because they always think they're saving somebody with their horrible policies that are driving people into poverty and death and murder and all that. So, it's it's going to be all right, obviously. But why would you waste your time supporting people who are literally destroying everybody who looks just like you? You notice white people don't have that problem. For all the drama that the Democrats foist on the black community, they take care of their white constituents. Oh, yes, they do. That's the other story that we're going to get into. So let me get over here real quick. So we've got this story about how the Democrats, the libs, they don't want a bunch of homeless people moving into their neighborhood. Now, remember, the Democrats care about the poor. Republicans don't. Or Democrats care about blacks. Republicans don't. Democrats love all people. Republicans don't. So that's why this story is so odd and shocking. It's so weird to see this in print, because how can this be true? Democrats all love homeless people, don't they? It says these wealthy New Yorkers are fighting to keep the homeless out of their liberal neighborhood. Wealthy New Yorkers are furious that Mayor Bill de Blasio plans to open a homeless shelter in their ritzy Manhattan neighborhood. Dozens of wealthy residents packed into a community meeting to voice their anger over the decision to move 150 homeless men into the former Park Savoy Hotel. The residents are concerned that the move will increase crime and decrease property values in their neighborhood on Billionaires Row. So this is a part of Manhattan that's packed to the gills with billionaires, and more power to you. Now, let me just add something here, because y'all know how I like to do. I just can't help myself. I have to do it. I have to say it. You know I have to say it. You know what I'm going to say? If they're all billionaires, they could take some of their billions and they could buy an empty building and remodel it and make a homeless shelter for men in another part of town, and they would be running it. And so they could decide where this was going to go. Instead, they have this big empty building, and it's near where they live. It's in their neighborhood, and it's been empty for a while. So any one of them could have bought it. But instead, now the mayor wants to turn it into a homeless shelter, and they don't want that because they don't want the crime. So are they being bigoted? Are they saying that all homeless men are criminals? Are they using government source data that shows that people who are homeless have a higher rate of criminality than everyone else? And if they are doing that, how dare they? How dare they malign and mischaracterize the activities of some disadvantaged populations? What if some of those homeless men are black? How dare they? That sounds like racism. What if some of them are Jewish, and that sounds like anti-Semitism? What if some of the homeless people are refugees or are from south of the border? How dare these wealthy liberals on Billionaires Row fix their mouths to say negative things about these people? They're homeless and they deserve a place to be. Now, I personally, y'all know me, I'm real. I don't want a homeless shelter in my neighborhood. But I'm also not a liberal, and I don't make it my business to run around lying and trying to virtue signal and act like I'm so much better than everybody else because I've got all these wonderful, lofty ideas about what other people should do with their money and their homes and their belongings. I bet you anything, we go ask these liberals on Billionaire Row, what do you think about the refugees coming into America? They'll be like, we need more refugees, just not here in this neighborhood. Yeah, that's who these people are. So how are these poor people whose only livelihood is in one bag, how are they to deal with a $6 coffee and a $15,000 dress on the windows of Fifth Avenue? Asked one resident. I mean, aren't they funny? A middle-aged man with a foreign accent. He's a billionaire. Aren't we breeding crime by doing this? He asked. So then a whole bunch of other billionaires gave him applause for saying that. Some residents have formed a group, the West 58th Street Coalition, to oppose the homeless shelter in their neighborhood. Because you know the liberals can get a group together real quick. Suzanne Silverstein is the coalition's leader. She's a fashion executive who is the president of an upscale women's fashion line in Parker, New York, according to her LinkedIn profile. Yeah. So in other words, bring all the refugees, bring all the homeless, bring all the third worlders, but bring them to a neighborhood that's not right here on Park Avenue in Manhattan on Billionaires Row. Don't play. These people don't want those people in their neighborhood. They wouldn't even want me and my family to live there because we're not billionaires. And oh, by the way, we're also black. Get real. These people are not who they want you to think they are. Even Jimmy Kimmel wouldn't live on a street where I lived. That is because he is an elitist limousine liberal too. And they're all lying about what they really believe. When we get back, we'll have more for you. Stay there.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for health insurance, or more importantly, if you signed up for a plan that you're just not happy with, you still have a choice. It's called MediShare. MediShare is a Christian healthcare sharing program that's been around for 25 years, and they have hundreds of thousands of members all across the country. And get this, over the years, MediShare members have shared more than $1 billion of each other's medical bills. Best of all, you could save a lot of money with MediShare. The typical savings for a family is about $500 a month. Your savings could be more or less, but think about what you could do with that extra money. Think you're stuck with a high-cost health plan that doesn't have a lot to offer? Well, think again. You can join MediShare anytime, so call them today and check it out. Here's the number to find out more, and there's no pressure. They're super easy to talk to. 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-PSALM-23.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a legacy moment. I'll never forget reading Frank Peretti's book, The Wounded Spirit. I was deeply moved by his personal testimony of the painful ridicule and rejection he experienced in his teen years. He was excluded because of his lack of athletic ability and physical deformity. I must admit, as I read that book, my eyes filled with tears on many occasions. He said the thing that kept him going was, first of all, a teacher who believed in him, the unconditional love and acceptance of his parents and his family, and then thirdly, the realization that Jesus Christ accepted him and didn't give up on him. Rejection is an awful thing. Sadly, there's too much rejection even in the Christian community. Oh, we're more subtle about it than high school kids are, but sometimes our arrogant attitudes announce, hey, look, you can't come in this group. You're not really a part of us. Thankfully, God doesn't treat us as if there's a pecking order where some of us are better than others. No, there's an equal access to Calvary and equal access to the heart of God. In Ephesians chapter 3, verses 3, 4, and 6, the Apostle Paul talks about God's great plan of inclusion. He says that by revelation there was made known to me the mystery, as I wrote before in brief. By referring to this, when you read, you can understand my insight into the mystery of Christ. To be specific, that the Gentiles are fellow heirs and fellow members of the body and fellow partakers of the promise in Christ Jesus through the gospel. Fellow heirs, fellow members, fellow partakers, they're not excluded. Here's what I want you to remember today. If you placed your faith in Jesus Christ, you're on the team and you have all the rights and privileges of everybody else. You're accepted.
More information about the ministry of Crawford Loritz can be found online at livingalegacy.org.
Sometimes I wonder if you're really listening, or if all of my words are just leaving my mouth floating up in the air. I've been told that I'm crazy, putting all of my faith into the arms of somebody else. Spend nights awake wondering if he's there.
Welcome back to the program, everybody. Stacy, why are you so mad? Why are you so upset? I'm not upset. My weekend is not going to be changed by the fact that Jimmy Kimmel is still a liar, or that rich liberals in New York City and Manhattan are showing their true colors. Please, I am not fazed at all. But what I am doing is sharing with you passionately how these people, with one side of their mouth, they're advocating for all kinds of lawlessness, but on the other side, they're living straight and clean. Check out how they live. Look at how these rich people live. Look at Jimmy Kimmel, married to the same woman, children with her. He's advocating for homosexual marriage and any other kind of thing you can think of. But how is he living? He lives a traditional lifestyle because that is the roadmap for success. Oh, yes, it is. Absolutely. How can he do what he does in his business life without the support of a loving, caring, stay-at-home wife, or at least a wife who prioritizes taking care of their children so that he can do what he has to do? Yeah, that traditional model that he regularly disdains on his program. That's how he's living. So, just check out the lives of the people on MSNBC and CBS and CNN and all of them. They're living in ways that can support the success of not only themselves, but their loved ones, their children, their extended family. They're doing all of the things they're telling you. That's just all liberal. That's all conservative orthodoxy. That's all the conservatives trying to control your life. but they're not living wild and crazy because living wild and crazy shortens your life expectancy and makes your life horrible. So to round out the rest of the story about these limousine liberals in Manhattan, and I mean, who's surprised by them behaving like this? Not I. She says the residents who formed the group, they're led by Suzanne Silverstein, who is a fashion executive, and she's the president of this upscale women's fashion line, Parker, New York. And she says, actually, a restaurant owner is quoted in the piece. Her name is Maria Loy, and she spoke to CBS 2, and she said, this is a tourist area. Can you imagine you are like next door? You have the best hotels in New York City. You destroy that in order to help 150 people? She describes, or has been described in local media as a celebrity chef. New York One reports that some residents have hired a public relations expert and a lawyer in their fight to keep the homeless people out of their neighborhood. Now, again, if this were a group of people who had no other means, no access, like most neighborhoods, when Barack Obama was taking people who were here illegally from the border and busing them into the interior of the country, choosing small towns with populations of 450 to 1,000 and dumping off 20 or 30 refugees or 20 or 30 illegal aliens at a time with nothing but like $40 in their pocket. These people don't speak but a lick of English. He was having these people bust into little white towns all in the rural areas of the country. And then the people, you would just wake up and there's like all these people dressed like they're from a foreign country, walking around asking for food, asking if they can work. And you're like, where'd you come from? We just arrived, looking for a place to live, looking for a house to rent, looking for someone to give them something. This is what the Obama administration was doing. Notice he didn't bus these people into Nancy Pelosi's district or into the neighborhood that he moved into when he left the White House. No, because liberals don't expect their policies and their wonderful feelings-based ideas to impact them. These are your neighborhoods they want these people to go to, not theirs. So they're rich. They need to make sure that their fancy hotels and their beautiful celebrity chef restaurants and their fashion boutiques are not marred by the appearance of people who are homeless and haven't had a shower in a while, people who may or may not be mentally ill, people who are addicted to drugs. And the truth is, no one says, yeah, we need to move a homeless shelter right here into our subdivision. But if they wanted to help these 150 people, as they call them, why don't these billionaires do something with their money to help them? Skip 2 pairs of, $1,500 boots and donate that money to build this shelter someplace where you think it's more appropriate. These are people who can buy whole buildings. They can buy whole neighborhoods with what they keep in their checking account. But they're not going to do anything to help anybody. They're just going to yell and scream because de Blasio wants to put these people in their neighborhood. So one resident actually said that de Blasio is moving the homeless into the wealthy neighborhood to get at President Trump. I think it's crazy. I think he just wants to get to Trump. Leonardo de Vega said to CBS 2. His son lives across the street and Trump lives a block away. By the way, Manhattan residents overwhelmingly supported Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump in the 2016 election, giving her more than 86% of their vote. And you know why? Because Hillary Clinton would never, ever want to move homeless people into a neighborhood where her rich constituents are located. She would put them in neighborhoods where her poorer constituents are located. Notice how they usually have all of the homeless shelters are in the inner city, and that's where all of the black constituents of a certain income level are located. Yeah. So not all black people live in the inner city, but the areas where you get 106% of the vote, 106%, or 108% of the vote goes to Barack Obama as opposed to Mitt Romney. Those are areas that also voted 108% for Hillary Clinton. Yeah. Put it all together. It works. It links up. So there's that. And then there were a couple of other things. You got the rich liberal New Yorkers, and then you've got this story about Bermuda, the country, actually being the first jurisdiction in the world to repeal same-sex marriage. Now, I'm taking this in as you are. I actually saw this story this morning and I didn't want to ruin it for myself because I'm dying to figure out why they would make that decision. but I didn't want to ruin it for myself. So I saved it. I printed it out and saved it for the show so we can learn about it together. So this is a British island territory, obviously Bermuda, and they've swapped marriage for domestic partnerships for LGBT couples in a move criticized as an attack on equal rights. So Bermuda has become the first jurisdiction to legalize and then repeal same-sex marriage in what critics have called an unprecedented rollback of civil rights. Bermuda's governor has signed into law a bill reversing the right of gay couples to marry, despite a Supreme Court ruling last year which authorized same-sex marriage. So Walton Brown is Bermuda's Minister of Home Affairs, and he is quoted as saying the legislation signed by Governor John Rankin would balance opposition to same-sex marriage on the socially conservative island while complying with the European court rulings that ensure recognition and protection for same-sex couples in the territory. So they're trying to do a balancing act between what the people who live there actually want and what the ruling authorities over them, the EU, are actually forcing them to do. Bermuda's Senate and House of Assembly passed the legislation by wide margins in December, and a majority of voters opposed same-sex marriage in a referendum. The act is intended to strike a fair balance between two currently irreconcilable groups in Bermuda by restating that marriage must be between a male and a female, while at the same time recognizing and protecting the rights of same-sex couples. And it's Brown, his ruling Progressive Labor Party, proposed the repeal. So there's a bunch of quotes from people who think it's horrible and it, totally discriminatory. And there's a bunch of also Associated Press and Reuters contributed to the report, and they're just basically sharing like all of the reactions from the people in the area to what they're doing. And I mean, it's Bermuda, so it's teeny tiny, and what can you do? It's a tiny, tiny territory of Great Britain, but it just goes to show you that when people are fervently placed in their beliefs and they're very, very adamant about it, that they can make changes. And so, that's why I don't lose hope for America as far as the redefinition of marriage and as far as the rollback of funding Planned Parenthood. I believe that it can be done. So, we'll have to wait and see. So that brings us over to, I don't know if you guys have noticed all this week, there have been these stories that have broken that have proven that President Obama said things that weren't true back when he was the president. Namely, he said he didn't know anything about the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails. He didn't know anything about it. He wasn't briefed on it. He also said that after the election, when he was still president, but President Trump was the president-elect, he said he didn't know anything about there were no wiretaps, that then candidate Trump or President-elect Trump he's not telling the truth about that. Well, now we know different. So CNN legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin was on the show. This was earlier this morning, and he was talking about the allegations of former President Barack Obama wiretapping President Donald Trump's campaign. Now, this was on New Day. So you've got Allison Camerata, John Berman, and CNN analyst Jeffrey Toobin. So Toobin begins the segment off by claiming average Americans couldn't follow along with the FISA memo because it was too complex for them. Now, I don't know about that. I don't know if the average American couldn't read through that memo and get the gist of it, but this is what he was asserting. So here's a quote from him. He says, "I think the Nunes memo is such a complicated story, frankly, that ordinary civilians are having a hard time following. I suspect that most people have made up their mind to the extent that they have an opinion about this story at all. It's turned into a partisan food fight." Okay, sure. So he goes on and he says the Democrats have already made their arguments about the whole subject. So the memo itself, I mean, people will read it, those who are interested, but I think this has been the story of the past Trump year. Stories that were, explosive and big. Remember, he said, Obama wiretapped me. Like what? That was a huge story we spent months on. So CNN, if you remember, they'd criticized Trump for saying that. And it wasn't just them. Everybody mocked that tweet. President Trump tweeted out, Obama had my wires tapped. And everybody was like, wires tapped? What's he talking about? That's not even real. Like they didn't understand that Back in the day, we used to call it wiretapping because they would actually come and place a small wire on your telephone wire, and that small wire would lead to a recording device, and it would record everything, or it would transmit a signal so that vans in the vicinity could pick up everything that was said on that wire. So that's why it's called a wiretap. Nowadays, and it's an electronic activity where they just say, I want to have everything on that line, and they have it. But it still means the same thing. And when they get down into that kind of minutia where they're mocking what you're calling something, it's because you're on the money, you're hot on the trail. So we saw that. And so he's on CNN's New Day, and he's talking about the fact that even though CNN had criticized him for making the claims, it's later been confirmed. We now know for a fact the FBI has confirmed that they tapped Paul Manafort. And that due to their tapping of Paul Manafort, they had access to President Trump, who was then candidate Trump. So just as Jeffrey Toobin was about to start dissecting the wiretap story, Camerata cuts him off. And she says, it's about the memo and the rebuttal. That's the heart of this. Toobin said, it's whiplash. Before Toobin could share more thoughts on the story, Berman stepped in and began to steer the conversation in a different direction. I will say, when the Republican memo finally came out, we did learn some things. This didn't necessarily support the argument that they were making, but we did learn a few items there. It's possible that we'll learn a few new things when the Democratic memo comes out. And so, you know, it's like waving the flag. Somebody was in one of their ear and was like, cut it, move it along. We ain't talking about how President Obama tapped any wires. We know it's true. We know Trump called it out, but we've already mocked him and we've already moved on. Keep it moving. Because, you know, they're in your ear the whole time you're on. So everyone who's on the television show, seated around the table, live in the studio, has a piece in their ear, and the producer can communicate with you through that. They also have a piece in your ear when you're here in your own town and you're at the studio and you're remoting in. So everyone, they can talk to you in your ear. They can also cut your feed. They can cut your mic. They can tell you, we're not discussing that, move on. And most of the time, the communication between the producers and the people who are talking, it's between the actual employees, not the guests. So they know what they're doing. They don't call it television production for nothing. This is classic CNN. Classic. It's classic CNN. So we now know that they did indeed tap the wires of President Trump. We know that he was their true target, that Carter Page was an FBI operative who brought down a legitimate Russian spy, and more. We know a lot more. We know tons more now. So let's talk about these Steele dossier coincidences, because the Democrats aren't going to talk about it. The Democrats' media arm of, MSNBC and the others, they're not going to talk about it, but we will here on this program. At least 4 separate coincidences have emerged as the public learns more information about this unverified dossier, the Steele dossier, and how it was created. The original story of the 35-page document was pretty simple. It was Fusion GPS investigating then presidential candidate Donald Trump, hiring former British spy Christopher Steele. He then writes the dossier. We all can accept that as, yeah, that's what we know. But there are 4 significant coincidences that the American people, you're not learning about this from your mainstream media sources. The first coincidence to emerge from the dossier involves the June 9th, 2016 meeting held at Trump Tower between Donald Trump Jr., Paul Manafort, Jared Kushner, and a group of Russians. 2 of the Russians at that meeting, which, remember, we covered this on the show months ago, Natalie Veselnitskaya and Renat Ajmetskin, happened to be working at the time of that meeting with Glenn Simpson, who's founder of the opposition research firm that commissioned the dossier. And who initiated that meeting? Those Russians did, not the Trump administration. It's a trap, to quote Star Wars. We'll cover the rest of the coincidences and more. We'll take your calls, 866-963-2037. When we get back, stay there.
come to steal, kill, and to destroy. You belong to me. Your soul, your mind, and your body. You chose death over life. You are mine, forever and ever and ever.
Hell is real. Matthew chapter 25 verse 46 says there will be those who will receive eternal punishment in hell, but the righteous will have eternal life in heaven with our Savior Jesus Christ. Which will you choose? Let's go deeper at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Listen to Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp.
I mean, did you hear that?
Pointed.
Remember that you're not only a Christian on Sunday.
And insightful.
Deception and lies have been accepted as the norm from the Democrats.
But most of all, she's on the right.
That scripture from the Bible that says the heart of the fool inclines to the left just kept popping into my mind.
Stacy on the Right. Now heard weekday afternoons from 2 to 4 Central on Urban Family Talk. Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fold because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Quarter, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk.
This is Life Issues with Brad Mattis, president of Life Issues Institute.
Donald Clyde Willis is a Bakersfield, California abortionist with a reputation for botching procedures. Last year, he sent 6 women to the hospital, one maimed so badly she will never be able to bear children. Women of California were temporarily spared when Willis was reportedly involved in an accident that broke his arm. But less than a week after returning to his deadly craft, the abortionist battered another woman. She was injured during a late-term abortion procedure and rushed to a hospital for emergency surgery, where doctors spent 2 hours repairing the damage. She required 2 pints of blood, and sadly, the baby was delivered dead. Legal abortion kills innocent babies and victimizes women. It must be stopped.
Follow us on Twitter at Life Issues USA and stay informed, more informed than you've ever been.
The borrowing that we do for our interest is one of the larger items. I think it's the 3rd largest item that we spend right now. And so as interest payments grow, it crowds out other things. And so right now we've got, we're still paying government interest probably in the low 2% or a little bit more. Imagine what happens when it's 5%. Even if interest stays at 2%, because government is growing and we have a bigger and bigger debt, we're going to have an $800 billion interest payment. It'll be the #1 item. It's going to crowd out everything else. So there are ramifications. There are people who say that when you're at 100% of your GDP, like your whole economy, when your whole economy equals your debt, that you're at this sort of precipice. You're at this point where you may reach a point of no return. There are ways we could fix this. Later this year, I'll offer a budget that freezes spending. And you say, well, how bad could that be? We're just going to give government the same amount they had last year. If you freeze all spending, everything, I mean everything that we spend money on, you balance the budget within about 5 or 6 years. And you'd get things back in balance if you did it. But if you talk to people up here, they would freak out. And I promise you, we'll probably get 10 or 15 votes for freezing spending to try to get it back in order. But this is what we have to ask as American people. Are you happy with your government? Are you happy with trillion-dollar deficits? Are you happy with people who just don't seem to care? They care somehow more about this clasping hands and everybody gets everything and you get to get home for the weekend. But I think the ramifications for our country are severe and significant. And what I would ask my colleagues, as well as those across the country, is basically What do you want from government? Do you want some physical item? Is government here so someone can get you something and give you some physical item, a cell phone or a car? Is that what government's for? Or is government here to preserve your liberty?
Excellent question from Senator Rand Paul. Call-ins are open at 866-963-2037. Last segment of the show. And I want to point you over to StacyOnTheRight.com where we have some encouraging posts up over there. I realized that during the time I was writing for the NRA, I had mostly, like, there were just gun posts all the time, but I was writing for them twice a week. And now that there's a little hiatus from that, there's just, I'm feeling more like I want to put some more content from the show up over at Stacy on the Right so that you guys can have some of that as well. It's really great to access if you're online and you're looking for something. You can find some of that over there from the program, things that we do here. So segments that we have here, some of that content, so you can find it. And also links to some of the things that we cover here on the show. It's come to my attention that a great many of our listeners are not Facebook people. So when I'm constantly saying, oh, I put it up on Facebook or I put it on Twitter, that still doesn't mean access for everyone. So having a repository, as we do at StacyOnTheRight.com, and put the links up over there. Then you have no barriers to accessing them, watching the videos, listening to the audio, et cetera, et cetera. And we also have a link up over there for the podcast from Google Play and iTunes. So you can also get the podcast that way. So welcome back to the show. Call lines are open 866-963-2037. We're just listening to Senator Rand Paul coming in from the break, talking about there's some baked in the cake inherent dangers to the new budget deal that's been brought forward. And you guys have heard me say it a million times. I'll say it a million more times. You know, I give credit to the president when it's due, when there are things that I don't like. And maybe there's a method to the madness. Maybe there's a reason why he made this deal. I know obviously it was crisis theater yet again. The government's going to shut down. We could only get 13 days out of it. Now the government's going to shut down. And so everybody's all freaked out. So they'll almost sign anything. You know, the aliens are going to take over America. Well, we got to let them do it because we don't want the government to shut down. It's that kind of crazy stuff. And so what I'd like to see them do is something that Rand Paul mentioned in another speech that he made. And we don't have the audio for that, but I'll just sum it up for you. He said, we need to get away from that. We need to get away from this idea that we have to have crisis theater in order to get stuff done in Washington, D.C. I think that is so true. For people to make $178,000 a year plus the other stuff like leadership pay and all that, it's just mind-boggling that this is the way they do business. Imagine a company, a Fortune 500 company or a small local company or a regional company with executives. You know, if you're making $178 a year, you're in management, and your way of doing things is to wait until the deadline for ordering the parts that you need to make, you know, the widgets that you need to parts that you need to make the widgets that you sell. And you wait until the deadline is basically 10 minutes away. If you order after this time, you know, 10 p.m. tonight, then you can't get the stuff here in time to make the widgets. And all of your orders for the widgets will be either canceled or they'll be pushed back. It'll make the company look really bad. And it could possibly stop people from doing business with your company. Can you imagine a situation like that in a business, whether it's, you know, Chrysler where they're making cars, or McDonnell Douglas where they're making planes, or Amazon where they're shipping goods to people from third parties, and some of the stuff's actual Amazon stuff that they keep in their own warehouse. Can you imagine Jeff Bezos allowing his finance department or the procurement department at Amazon to wait until a few minutes before the deadline, and then everybody gets in a room and they hammer out what they're going to pay for this and that, and whether or not there are going to be any budget cuts, or whether or not people are going to sit on ball chairs or regular chairs, and when those are going to be ordered, and all that gets hammered out in the last 15 minutes before the deadline. And then some employee says, okay, can I hit send? And they're like, yeah. Oh, we just missed a shutdown of Amazon. And then they hit send, and the order for the parts that make the widgets goes out, and everything goes back to normal. Can you imagine a business being run that way? No, you can't, because you know that any business that's run like that would cease to be a business in very short order, because that is not only inefficiency, but it's foolishness. It's absolute, like, you can't say playground level, because that's an insult to the little people who play on playgrounds. You can't say toddler level because toddlers have never done anything to deserve being insulted like that. It just does, it defies all logic and reasoning that this is the way our federal government is run. And so no matter how much we support the Republicans or we believe in conservative government, this is not conservative government. This is, I can't plan anything out. I don't have access to pen, paper, or planning tools. I don't know any project managers. Nobody around me, I'm talking about the congressional members. Nobody around me has any staff. We don't understand how budgets work. We don't understand how processes work. I just work your way back from the deadline that you have. The deadline is the government shuts down X. Now work your way back. It takes this many weeks to get the document into everybody's hand. We got to have time to print it. We got to have time for everyone to read it. So, you got to build 7 days in for people to read it, 4 days in for them all to get printed, because apparently this budget was 700 pages long. And then you got to go back from there. Everyone has to have a chance to weigh in and add in their stuff and delete stuff and argue about stuff. So there's another month or two. So instead of them taking all that time off in December and working so few days in January, this should have been top priority. As soon as the tax reform legislation was completed, this should have been on. In fact, they should have been working on it before that. You can work on more than one thing at a time. But that's not what happened. So I'm over at National Review, and you guys know I do National Review pretty sparingly because they're never Trump. And so some of the stuff that they write it's tainted by this never Trump fanaticism. And so you have to kind of, you have to be careful over there. But this is worth us discussing a little bit. So this piece is by the editors over at National Review. And they say it's a bad deal, the budget bill that was just passed and signed into law by the president. And it's a bad deal because it hikes the domestic spending. They also say it's a bad deal because it ends the chance for conservative legislative achievements in 2018. Now, I don't understand why they're saying that, but let's see. The 2-year spending deal means the Republicans probably won't go to the trouble of passing a formal budget for 2019. It also means no chance for so-called reconciliation process that would allow them to enact meaningful legislation with only 50 votes in the Senate. So if the Republicans accept the deal, which they did, and forego the reconciliation process, they will have given up their chance to pass laws without Democratic support, which includes measures to ease the Obamacare regulations that would contribute to higher premiums in the coming years, or reforming welfare, which, oh my gosh. Okay, so that's pretty bad. Sorry, that's pretty bad. There's just no way around that. Then there's the price. So on its face, the deal costs about $300 billion over the next 2 years, and it will likely set the standard for future budget negotiations. So that means its cost will be almost $1.5 trillion over the next 10 years, and that is as expensive as the tax reform package. So not all of the extra spending is ill-advised, according to the editors over at NRO. That the deal raises defense spending caps by $160 billion is welcome news. The military has been painfully squeezed by the sequester. But in order to secure that money, the Republicans had to dangle $128 billion in domestic spending. And we don't see any meaningful budget offsets within the deal. So Republicans who are interested in passing major conservative reforms in 2018, which could be the last chance for years if Democrats succeed in taking the House later this year, should reject the deal and push for something better. But that's not what happened. And so, the mantra, the prevailing mantra around everywhere where people talk, in the back channel, is that when Republicans are not in power, they're very conservative. But when they're in power, they're not conservative at all. And this budget deal kind of makes that statement, that mantra, it kind of puts the truth to it. So I'm interested in hearing something about it's supposed to be this art of the deal. It's supposed to be this thing, the president has demonstrated it with the tax reform package, where he, according to the Uber driver I was riding with one day in DC last week, he said the president bullied them into accepting his tax reform package, and it was a good thing. And so I'm trying to kind of keep my powder dry and hold my fire and wait and see, is there something to this that we're not seeing, a part of the negotiation or the deal or whatever they did that brings some clarity to this, where we're saying, yeah, they traded off all the spending, but what they're getting in return is X. I do like that it was a clean budget deal without any of this garbage about we have to take care of the DACA recipients. We don't have to do anything but stay black and pay our taxes. And if you're not black, it's stay white and pay your taxes. That's a little saying that people in the South like to say. When someone says, you have to so-and-so, I don't have to do anything but stay black and pay my taxes. That is something that I often will say, especially if the person saying it is someone who's telling me that I have to do something that I don't want to do. Now, obviously, I have more things that I have to do besides that. But the point is, we don't have to do anything for DACA recipients. We don't have to do anything for illegal aliens except follow existing federal law on immigration. We don't have to do anything for any of these constituency groups. In fact, if you're not doing anything for the homeless veterans or the veterans who are committing suicide at astronomical rates, you're not doing anything for the regular homeless folks who are in America, why do we need to prioritize DACA recipients over all of those groups? Go down all of the groups of Americans who need some help, whether it's from the private sector or the federal government. And when you've exhausted that list and every single person has been helped, then come at me with some discussion about helping the DACA recipients. First of all, are they DACA recipients or are they just illegal aliens too? Because that's what they're illegal aliens. That's what they are. The dreamers, not dreamers. They are here illegally. They're dreaming about you and I putting our own best interests aside and prioritizing their needs for amnesty and giving them the amnesty so they can go on mocking America and burning our flags and flying Mexican flags, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No thanks. I got other things I'd like to prioritize as a taxpayer, especially after y'all know I talked about it on the show, how I got that note from the Missouri Department of Revenue about they want to know what kind of vehicles we've got. Yes, we filled it out. Yes, we mailed it back because we don't want to pay the fee. Yeah, now they're going to be taxing us on whatever it is that we bought. And I can't even think. Did we? Yeah, we did. Yeah, we're going to have more tax. Yay, more tax, a higher tax burden. Excellent. Just fantastic. Meanwhile, they're talking to me about DACA recipients. And I know there are people out there who are dealing with even more serious things. I recently learned of a couple of friends who their family members are dealing with some very serious medical issues. And I was just thinking about how often it is that we take something small and we elevate it to the level of something that is just astronomically important, when in reality, if you're walking around and you're healthy and you have a warm place to sleep at night and your utilities are all on and your family members are healthy and they're with you, you're the richest person on earth. We're so blessed, we don't even know what it is that we're supposed to be happy about or be thankful for at this point. I just, going into the weekend, I can't tell you how little I have in my room for thinking about things or caring about things. I got no space for DACA recipients, no space for so-called dreamers. I'd rather think about our veterans, our orphans, our widows, our people. They're going to be top of mind for me. And being grateful for what we have here. So that's the show. I hope you are blessed this weekend and that you have a lot of rest and relaxation and time to do whatever it is that you want to do. And I'll be back with you, Lord willing, on Monday with more Stacy on the Right. Thanks for being here today.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast